Hey, what is up, nerds? My name is Jeremy Akers, Jeremy Nathaniel Akers, and I want to talk at length. This is about to be the exact opposite of a short, about the extraordinarily powerful way in which liberating structures are exceedingly modular and can work together at different scales by showing you a particular string of liberating structures that consists of many different parts. It has elements of heard, seen, respected. It has elements of the spiral journal. It has elements of grief or transition walking. It has elements of 1, 2, 4 all, as well as discovery action dialogue. So I think a lot of people think about liberating structures as distinct, individual, separate tools, right? And they are certainly that. Like in the liberating structures community of practice, like a lot of folks also have an awareness that like we can take these tools and we can string them together, right? Where we can use the output of one structure as the input of the next structure, and we will make one sort of line or an arc across all of these different things. And that's definitely true. What I want to show is actually the way in which we can recompose the structure by using elements of one inside the container of another in order to nest them or string them together in a way that I think is much more flexible and interesting than most people are aware. And like kind of looks like this, right? So like already we're sort of telling a little bit more of the story just with the visual icons. We're going to use the prompt of heard, seen, respected, as well as grief walking inside this thing that is the spiral journal. And then we're going to stack on 1, 2, 4 all and discovery action dialogue. And this is a little bit closer to a representation of what's actually going on in this string. But this is, I think, about as good as I can get to sort of render these things. So what we're going to do is actually use 1, 2, 4 all as a bit of a macro structure, actually. We're going to use this as the pattern of interaction across the whole thing that is going to give us the dance moves. And inside the space of 1, we're going to make use of spiral journal, with these prompts of heard, seen, respected, and inspired by grief walking or transition walking. And then in the 2 as well as the 4, we're going to use the pattern of heard, seen, respected in order to come together for the all space and make use of discovery action dialogue. So, like, if you practice liberating structures, this might mean something to you. Like you might get what all these things are. So I guess so that I can make this make sense, let's start at the top and I will explain each one of these component structures individually and then come back to the blueprint or pattern, the way in which I intend to use them all together. And hopefully that doesn't take, it takes as long as it takes. I don't give a shit, really. But hopefully it makes sense and offers some value for some folks trying to figure out what the fuck, why is this guy and these nerds keep talking about liberating structures? Like I've seen those. I've heard about them. I've tried Triz. What's the big fucking deal? So, start at the top, heard, seen, respected. Heard, seen, and respected is a very powerful structure, sort of on the B side of a lot of people's set list. It doesn't get a lot of airtime because it's extraordinarily intimidating, and people people have reactions to it. It is that type of change, right? That actually does something, and that doing something freaks people the fuck out. So I don't emphasize this aspect of setting the stage with many liberating structures, but what I will say is that heard, seen, and respected, this is a hard requirement. You really gotta let people know what the fuck is gonna happen before it happens. Otherwise, they're gonna lose their goddamn minds. And so, but let's not put the cart before the horse. This structure of heard, seen, and respected is really about listening, right? And practicing listening. And the goal of listening is for sure to shift the vibe. If I had to write this over again, which guess what? I can do that. I would actually say, what is it about listening? Like it's learning, right? It's actually about learning. And I can't spell. Whatever. Leave me alone. So we listen to learn. And in this structure, we're also learning to listen. So that's how it is. Why would we make use of this structure in particular to learn to listen and listen to learn? Because we're all human and we all have a similar set of experiences. In terms of setting the stage for heard, seen, and respected, I think it's really an exceptionally great idea to make use of the accusation audit that was popularized by Chris Voss from the Black Swan Group, and in his book Never Split the Difference, which I still contend is one of the greatest coaching books I've ever read. Check it out if you haven't. Accusation audit uses this pattern that is labeling, which uses these blueprints of, especially it seems like, but to label sort of in advance. I know people are going to have reactions to heard, seen, respected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label those potential reactions before we get to them. A, to sort of let people know this is what you're in for. And B, by foreshadowing that, it sort of helps to, I don't know, it actually helps to lower people's guard, ironically. So what does that look like? So for heard, seen, respected, you might think that this exercise is way too personal. It may seem like I'm asking you to relive trauma and uncomfortable feelings. Like you're definitely going to feel vulnerable and uncomfortable when it comes to this exercise. There's more, and I would encourage you to do more. But that, even at a basic level, those three of getting those things out there is enough to let everybody know, hey, this is not a fucking game. Like, get your head on right. We're not playing around. So after that, setting the stage, things get pretty straightforward, but hot and heavy and super intense. We're going to pair up, and each person is going to take 7 minutes to tell a story about a time they did not feel heard, seen, and respected. That's it. Tell a story about a time you did not feel heard, seen, and respected. And as we do this, we tell this story about this shitty time, right? If this is not a fun time we're going to tell a story about. It's not, yay, these are the good times, guys. But it is a powerful story that unites us in terms of all being humans that feel vulnerable and are just humans. So as we do that, like I said, we're here to listen. And of course, there's an infinite number of great like frameworks around active listening and empathetic listening and deep listening, from Theory U to this jackass and that jackass. I mean, to me, the essence of listening is listen with your whole body. Listen with your head, listen with your heart, listen with your nuts, listen with your head, shoulders, knees, and toes. As you're hearing this story, just notice all the sensations and what it does to you. And what our goal is like I said, to listen without judgment or the desire to fix things for people, because there's really no fixing this story, right? For those of us of the masculine or of the male type, we often listen to stories about how other people in our lives are having difficult times and we want to fix shit. And guess what? That's not always the fucking vibe. So, listen with your whole body. If you want to tack on, this is also a great chance to practice inquiry. While inquiry is not the primary learning goal, if that is something that you're working on in your context, this is a great time to try it. We're talking about a very sensitive topic. Be careful, but asking questions can really help people to bring out their story. So, in particular, the questions of anything else, just that, it's that easy. Anything else to share about that? Also getting into like the narrative portion of, okay, what happened next? And then what happened is a very great prompt to help people sort of flesh out and move the narrative forward. As well as this one, right? This one is definitely the spicier of the questions, but what was that like for you? Man, what was that like for you? What, with all that going down, how, I mean, some people like the how do you feel question. I'm less into that, but whatever, go for it. After we share our stories, each person takes a turn. Then in that pair, we're going to just take 5 minutes to debrief and discuss what it felt like to both listen to your partner's story, but also to tell your partner's story. So like I said, this exercise brings up all types of feelings, all types of reactions. That question is absolutely essential to make sure that those feelings and reactions have a place to be observed and included in the exercise. If you do not include, this is why that accusation audit is so powerful. If you do not include the reactions that people have to this, I think you're missing the whole fucking point. So include them. And if you want to go nuts with that inquiry aspect, like I said, it's not the primary learning goal, but this is a really good opportunity to practice it. Then make use of clean language. As a listener, keep your fucking opinions to yourself, so to speak. But you can ask questions that help guide the discovery of your partner. Helping heuristics obviously come into play. I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm just going to keep going. So, after we have done the one-on-one and the debrief, shared what it's like, we're going to come together. We're going to double date in these groups of 4. And in just 5 minutes, we're going to discuss what patterns were revealed in these stories and what importance do we assign to them. Do we assign to the stories? Do we assign to the patterns? The correct answer to that is yes. Just 5 minutes. What do we notice in common with all of these stories? After that, we're going to come together across all the groups. We're just going to take 5 minutes to talk about the sort of now what space. And that is by grounded in this question of how might we use both heard, seen, respected, and liberating structures in general to address the challenges revealed in those patterns. So there's a bunch of stories. Patterns were revealed. In those patterns, challenges were certainly there. So how do we use heard, seen, and respected in particular, and liberating structures in general to address those patterns and challenges? Take notes on this stuff. Get a flip over. Yada, yada, yada. But there we are. In 35 minutes, we will have practiced listening, revealed our shared humanity, and shifted the shit out of the vibe. If you're in an environment where people do not feel safe, where there is insecurity, where there is some animosity, where there is boys being boys. Ugh, it pains me to say that. I understand that folks will rightly think, oh shit, this is too vulnerable. I don't want to do that exercise here. I will make the argument to say that is exactly why you must. To avoid having the hard conversation only keeps things in their homeostasis. And like, okay, if you don't know any better, that's one thing. But now you do know better. So fucking use it. Anyway, I'm not going to... Let me keep my goddamn opinions to myself. I apologize. So once more, from the top, real quick recap. Set the stage. We're here to listen without judgment or fixing in just a couple minutes. And then invite people to pair up, 7 minutes per person, to tell a story about a time you did not feel heard, seen, or respected. After you've shared with your partner and your partner shared with you, debrief in 5 minutes about what it was like to both listen to and tell your story, and then pair up with another pair, double date, and talk about what patterns were revealed in the stories and the importance you assign to it. And then come together in the all space to talk about how you can use heard, seen, respected in particular, and liberating structures in general to address the challenges revealed in the patterns. 35 minutes to totally switch up the game. All right, so that's heard, seen, respected. The next element of this string that we got to explain in order to really make the string make sense is a spiral journal. Spiral journal, super simple. It's much more like an interaction pattern. It's really a great tool for silent reflection and also help grounding people in their own experience. And we want to use spiral journal because it really helps us get into this like together alone vibe. And so first thing you need to do is gather materials in order to set your stage. You're going to need a piece of paper. I think A4 or better is a good idea. And you're going to need something to write with. So once everybody's gathered their materials, you're going to take your sheet of paper and you're going to draw a big ass plus symbol, or make a 2x2 matrix, or fold your sheet in half in order to create 4 quadrants. And then what we're going to do at the intersection of that, plus is we're going to take our writing instrument and we're going to take a minute or two to draw the nicest, neatest, tidiest, cleanest, friendliest, calmest, most zen-like spiral that we possibly can. And of course, some people are going to laugh at this because this is kind of silly, like drawing a spiral on a page, trying not to allow the lines to touch, and trying to keep the space as even as possible is a little ridiculous in this go, 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 be working on the explicit goal all the time. But I promise you, if you do this, you will feel a state of zen and be much more chill than you were before you started. And so after you draw that spiral, you just offer a set of prompts to the group. So in each one of the quadrants, just take 2 minutes in a sort of like free associative writing style. So that means put your pen to the page and keep it moving. Just keep writing. And respond to one of the prompts in each of the quadrants. And you offer 4 prompts, 1 prompt for each quadrant, and away you go. That's your spiral journal. In just 10 minutes, you will help ground the group in their own experience and, have stimulated some reflection on whatever you set as the prompt here. So spiral journal, very very catch-all. Put whatever you want in these prompts. If you want people to think for some time all by themselves, they will have a way to do that. This is exceptionally good for context switching. So, like at the start of a meeting, God only knows what people were up to before they showed up to the meeting. So, if you give them the spiral journal, you give them 10 minutes to just catch their breath and just gather their thoughts about whatever the topic du jour is. And then you can go on and do the next thing. So spiral journal, that's what this string sort of consists of. And not last but not least, grief walking or transition walking. Why grief or transition walking? I mean, grief is a big word. I dig it. I think, there's a lot in the world to grieve about. And it's like naming that vibe has a particular type of power. It also does things to people, using powerful words. So you might find transition walking a less powerful and more palatable way to describe this structure. But how's it work? We're going to build directly on that pattern of spiral journal, right? So we're going to invite people to use the spiral journal, draw their 2x2, draw their spiral, and then in the space of the prompts, we're going to use these 4 prompts for transition walking. And that is, yes, it is true that, ellipsis, right? Yes, it is true that, and it was challenging because I will always remember and never forget. I will always remember and never forget. And now that I have shared my feels, it may be possible to. Now that I have shared my grief, it may be possible to. All right, so that's the spiral journal portion of transition or grief walking. In 10 minutes, we have given everybody an opportunity to reflect on a time that was challenging and kind of sucked, and are sort of helping them make the turn towards, all right, and now what? As we reflect on this stuff and bring it into relationship with one another, what becomes possible? After we have done that, we're really going to get into the making space vibe in order to connect to support. And, why? Because this challenging stuff exists. This is part of life, and we as individuals, for sure, we can put this all on individuals. You gotta deal with it, man up, or what the fuck ever. Or we can say, hey, challenging feelings exist, and we can support one another through them. So how are we going to do that? We're going to set up 4 listening stations in a large space or across adjacent spaces. Think about like if you're in a big conference hall that can fit a whole bunch of people, then put a listening station sort of in each corner with some space in between those listening stations. Or if you've got to string it out in separate sort of meeting rooms or office-y type spaces, that sucks, but okay. Do so, with trying to minimize the sort of like don't walk all over the God's creation going between these spaces, because we want to create quite a container of solemnity, right, as we touch on these challenging sensations. So set up 4 listening stations and then invite some people to volunteer as walkers between those listening stations. And these walkers are going to share the content of their spiral journal at these different listening stations. Everyone else who's not down to share sort of self-organizes amongst the 4 listening stations, spreading themselves evenly. So Get a group of volunteers who want to share their spiral journal. Everybody else spreads out over the listening stations. Once we've done that, one at a time, the walkers move through the 4 listening stations. And at each listening station, they read just one response to one prompt. So, one response to one prompt at each listening station. Depending on how many walkers you have, you can expect this to take between 10 to as much as 30 minutes, right? So people go from station to station. So as walkers pass through each listening station, one listener who sort of vibes or resonates, whatever hippie shit you think makes sense for your context, whoever really feels a lot of empathy for that particular share, they go and they stand behind the walker and they place a hand of support on the shoulder or back of the walker. And then they're going to follow them to the next station and the next station and the next station and the next station, right? So as walkers go from these 4 different stations, they're going to be picking up followers at every station, right? And at the end, they will have at least 4 followers with them, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to invite those, that group of 5+ people to go find themselves a quiet place to do a debrief. And we'll focus the conversation, what's appropriate, and we want to focus on what did you notice, of course, as a follower. Why did you decide to follow? What was it about the share that sort of touched you? And, offer, of course, some space to share the experience as a walker, right? What was it like for you to go and reveal these parts of yourself in front of your associates, your colleagues, your friends? And, also, how are you carrying or sharing any of the feels that you have? And of course, we would be remiss not to talk about the now what, and especially the now what I need from you, or what we need from one another to move through and support one another through these challenging sensations. So that takes about 60 minutes, depending on, again, the size of group you have and how many people decide to walk. I think you get the vibe that spaciousness is very much the vibe for this structure. Right? You don't want to be under time pressure when we are, and just generally, right? When strong sensations are present, take your time for them. Everybody knows they suck. I know they suck. You know they suck. So don't give yourself additional time pressure to get over them, but give them the time and space they require in order to metabolize them. So that is transition walking. And last but not least, we have discovery action dialogue. So as you sort of see and sense the setup here, the conclusion as it comes to discovery action dialogue is, okay, so, there have been times when we did not feel heard, seen, or respected. We're going to set that up as the initial prompt of our spiral journal. A time when I did not feel heard, seen, and respected is. And then we're going to go through the rest of the prompts of the spiral journal with the prompts of the grief walking. And then we're going to nest all of that in the sort of 1, 2, 4 all. Using the 2, 4. Oh, man, I'm so fucking tired. Sorry if I'm getting a little unhinged. I'm going to take a drink. Slow the fuck down with all these strong feelings. Yeah, so let's just focus on discovery action dialogue. Discovery action dialogue really helps us to identify not just good, but better than average good practice, and to share knowledge around that good practice. And we call that that better than average practice, we call that positive deviance. We want to spread people that are more this positive deviance around the place. So how we're going to do that is we're going to gather into groups usually of 6 or 7 people. We're going to split into a couple roles. We're going to ask one person to sort of take on the role mostly of host, and host, we mean mostly timekeeper and a keeper of the questions. We're going to ask somebody to take on the role of scribe. That scribe's really going to step out of active participation and help us create some form of shared documentation around this positive deviance or better than normal practice. And we're going to put it on the clock, basically 1 minute per person for each of these 7 questions. So if we were here in this group of, 7/6 active participants, we would put 6 minutes on the clock times 7 questions, as you see here, which would give us 46 minutes to engage in this dialogue. So the questions of the discovery action dialogue is where the juice is at. And our first question is, how do you know when the problem is present? So whatever your problem space is, define it well, but we're just going to put this placeholder for now. If we're thinking about this particular string, that would be, how do I know when a lack of respect is present? How do I know when we are not hearing, seeing, and respecting one another? So get some description of what the problem space actually looks and feels like from observable reality. And then how do you contribute to effectively solving that problem? When people are not being heard, seen, and respected, what do you do to effectively solve that issue, to address it? So problems exist. Solutions exist. The third question takes very seriously, what keeps us from using those good solutions all of the time? What is it that blocks us, impedes our progress, and gets in our way from doing the things that we know are effective? And then our 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th question really gets us into this better than average process or practice. Who do you know that is able to solve well for this problem space? That is, both solves the problem well, but is also not blocked by the stuff that normally blocks us. Who is it? Who are the people that are in our lives that are inspirations to us? There can be a tendency, to bring up fucking Gandhi or the Dalai Lama or Nelson Mandela or some shit like that. Really though, try and ground the experience in people who you know personally, that you have experienced, so that we can get to really describing what they do in actual observed reality. And when we talk about excuse me, what these people we know do, does their inspiration give us any new ideas about how we can not only solve the problem, but address the things that keep us from solving the problem? And then you sort of move, if you share a context, to sort of the implementation question. So what needs to be done to make these new ideas and better than normal practice sort of happen in our context? Does anybody volunteer to quarterback that shit? And if so, who else do we need to get, to be involved in order to realize these new ideas and to spread this positive deviance in our context? So you can tell that we're really, really into this solutions-based portion. And not just in a what could we do, not an imaginative way, but really using more of a narrative inquiry to talk about what has proven effective in both this and other contexts based on people we know. And just, again, spread that positive deviance all over the place. So it looks like I did not prepare quite as well for this as I hoped. I made all these goddamn design storyboards. But let's come back to how these things sort of nest together into a particular string. So you can see that we have all the building blocks to weave these things together, but not in this like linear, first I do that thing, then I do that thing, then I do that thing. No, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to use this pattern of 1, 2, 4 all, and especially in the one place, when it comes to the silent reflection, we're going to use spiral journal, and the prompts that we put in the spiral journal are going to be about a time when we did not feel heard, seen, and respected. And then we're going to use the prompt from Grief Walking to say, and that was challenging because... And I will always remember and never forget. And now that I have reflected or shared my grief, it may be possible to. So first, we use the spiral journal, like I said, to bring in heard, seen, respected, and the prompts from Grief Walking. And then we do the 2, 4 all, also in line with heard, seen, and respected, to sort of close things out. I think this is a powerful move because, like I said, we can expect people to have a response to heard, seen, respected. So by using the journal, we give them some time to like do their freak out, like quietly on paper. And we then like really build up. So we take a whole bunch of time to do this reflective work and to sort of think and like flesh out the story and what's challenging about it, to sort of come to grips with our situation. And then we ask people to tell their story to another person, to expose it to just one another. I think, if there is insecurity in the context, there's often enough security to share it with one other person. I might not trust all of you fuckers, but I trust you enough to tell my story. And what's great again about most liberating structures, and this one in particular, is that I will scale my story to exactly how much I trust you. I will scale my story to exactly how much I trust you. And as a host, a facilitator, a person, a team member, there's nothing that you need to do to encourage people to tell more than they are comfortable to telling. The scaling of trust to the actual trust in the room is a feature, not a bug. For sure, you can do all types of additional work in advance of this string in order to help warm the space up and ensure that help and build the trust before you get to the trust build. But no matter what, it's up to people to decide what they want to disclose to one another, and that's cool. If that's a lot, great. If that's not so much, well, great that it's anything, right? But after that pairing up, telling of the story and debriefing, remember? Debriefing what it was like to listen and what it was like to share. Then we go into groups of 4, and then we talk about, hey, what patterns were revealed in these stories that you had and we had, and what's the importance of those patterns and the stories? Like, what is it that makes this stuff so damn significant? And then as we come into the all space and talk about what do we need to do to address those patterns, I think discovery action dialogue is an extraordinary pattern to make use of to really expand that, hey, how do we take this stuff seriously and address this challenge? So, like I said, this is not a string in the sense of first we do this, then this, then this, then this, then this, but we're using these different structures as modular composable parts to combine them so that 1, 2, 4 all becomes this larger macro structure wherein we're using heard, seen, respected, and grief walking to power it, and then really unpacking and diving deep into the solution space with discovery action dialogue to reveal better than normal practice. So this is a string of liberating structures that you can make use of if you find yourself in a sketchy context and you really want to go for it. Grab the bull by the horns. I hopefully have given you more than enough information to feel like, oh, this is what this thing looks like from start to finish. I now have the tools to go and make use of it. I would challenge everybody, actually, if you've watched this video to this point, like, I think you got to, right? Find a place that either feels safe enough to do this or that feels so unsafe that you got to do this in order to get yourself to some psychological safety. Like, it's good when it's good. It's good when it's bad. Like, give it a try. If you make use of this within 48 hours, you're a badass motherfucker, and you're going to be a boss if you're not one already. My name's Jeremy Akers, Jeremy Nathaniel Akers. I actually did this string about a week ago, and it slaps. It was in a context that I thought was pretty sketchy. And, I'm not saying that it's a panacea, like we did not all hug at the end of the string, but it definitely worked to enable a conversation about what was previously unspeakable. And God willing, that conversation enables things to change. My name's Jeremy Akers, Jeremy Nathaniel Akers. Thanks for your time, attention, and energy. This has been a string of structures that included heard, seen, respected, spiral journal, grief walking, 1, 2, 4 all, and discovery action dialogue. Handle with care and be good to each other.